Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on co-designing aged care with consumer advisory bodies. My name is Janet Anderson. I'm the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commissioner, and I am chairing today's webinar. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting, wherever you are in Australia, and paying my respects to elders past and present, and extending those respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us for today's webinar. Today's session aims to increase our understanding and focus on the specific responsibilities of approved providers in relation to their governance arrangements in general, and specifically their obligations in relation to consumer advisory bodies. Now, we're going to talk briefly about the changes that were introduced in December 2023 for existing providers and what those new changes mean for providers. And we're also going to talk about effective governance and leadership, why they're vital to ensure the quality and safety of care and to deliver a positive aged care experience for older people. But as I said earlier, the main focus of today's webinar is going to be on consumer advisory bodies and the requirements of all approved providers. So I include residential, home, flexible care providers, short-term restorative care, to ensure that they, or possibly you if you're a provider, are complying with your new responsibilities under the amended Aged Care Act. Now, as I say, the Act was amended to strengthen governance arrangements applying to approved providers, and the changes were aimed at three things. First of all, strengthening leadership. Secondly, improving culture. And thirdly, increasing transparency and accountability. And these new responsibilities go largely to two of the 8 quality standards. The first is Standard 8, which is organisational governance, and the second is elements of Quality Standard 6, which is feedbacks and complaints. Now, a consumer advisory body, as most or if not all of you know, provides valuable feedback to the governing body and gives a voice for older people in aged care. So if you're a provider, even if you already have a consumer advisory body, you are required now under the Act to formally approach your consumers at least every 12 months to offer, revise or improve the advisory body arrangements. And Louise is going to mention the same thing. So today we're talking about the importance of consumer advisory bodies and the benefits they deliver, not just for older people receiving care, but also and particularly for the aged care provider who is delivering that care. Now, I'm very pleased to say that joining me for today's webinar is a panel comprising Louise McLeod, who's the Commission's Complaints Commissioner, Eric Grant, who's the board president of Coloma Home for the Aged, and Neil Aguilar, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Coloma Home for the Aged. So we have the board chair and the CEO of a provider, and they will introduce their service to us. And they have a particular experience that they are very pleased to be able to share with us, and I think from which we will learn a great deal. Now, our program today is a bit different from our normal format because I am going to engage both Neil and Eric in a bit of a table conversation, a panel conversation, to ask about their experiences and to ask them to share with us their lessons and some of their key tips, if you like, for getting this right. Before we get into the detail, like a few housekeeping issues, you can, and in fact, I encourage you to send your questions through at any time. Just use the question box via the live Q&A tab, which should be visible on your screen. We have a short survey, as we always do, at the end of this webinar. It will pop up automatically. Please take the time to complete it. It won't take you long. And we do genuinely look at all the survey responses to guide our continuous improvement journey and also to take any advice from you about content or coming attractions, things that you would like to hear more about. So please use it that way. We are recording today's webinar and we will publish that recording on our website, and we will send all registrants to this webinar a link to that recording. Also, and particularly important for those of you who perhaps want to learn more about consumer advisory bodies, we have published a range of resources which are already available, including fact sheets, videos, guidelines, and so on, they're all on our website now, and you can download them via the resources tab, excuse me, on your screen. So they're readily available to you even now. And I do commend them to you. They are an easy way into this topic, this really important subject. So to start us off, I'm going to invite Louise to talk with us, make some opening remarks about what is expected of providers in relation to their governance arrangements. Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Janet. So let's start with the basics. Person-centred care recognises and gives standing to the care recipient as an equal partner in planning, developing and monitoring their care. And that means that care recipients and their families and supporters all play a central role in discussing and making decisions about their care needs, including the service planning and delivery, setting priorities, identifying improvements, and measuring and evaluating care and services that they're receiving. So in short, their views really matter. If we now focus on governing bodies, their role is to ensure that the organisation is focusing on its care recipients in all aspects of service delivery by embedding the care recipient's voice at the core of the governing body decision making. And governing bodies must understand person-centred care and ensure that their views and concerns and the preferences of older people receiving care are well understood and suitably responded to. And this is an important subset of the governing body's responsibilities and their more encompassing responsibility to ensure that all key stakeholders of an organisation are appropriately identified and engaged with, because effective stakeholder engagement by providers supports high quality outcomes for older people. Now, if we focus specifically on consumer advisory bodies, the body provides valuable feedback to the governing body and also gives older people a voice. And providers may already have a consumer advisory body or bodies, and you can use these existing bodies for this purpose, providing you meet the new requirements. So providers must formally approach the people in their care at least once every 12 months to offer to revise or improve the current advisory body arrangements. And this means seeking feedback on how the current advisory body is working. And that ensures that any changes in the care and services being provided or the advisory body membership or needs of the members to participate in the advisory body are being considered and addressed annually by providers. Now, providers can have more than one consumer advisory body, depending on the interests of the older people in their care and their organisational needs. And when older people are effectively engaged in decisions about their care, there are a wide range of benefits for providers and workers. And these include increased knowledge and empowerment on what matters, increased mutual respect and enhanced relationships, flexibility and innovation in care delivery, the achievement of good care outcomes, and financial stability and enhanced reputation across the community. Now, as Janet mentioned, we do have a range of resources available on our website about consumer advisory bodies, including a meeting discussion guide with prompts to begin conversations at the next consumer advisory body meeting. And it covers things like food, co-designing care and complaints. That's all from me for the moment. Thanks, Janet. Back to you.
Thank you, Louise. All right, really nicely rounded introductory statement. Now we move to our guests from Coloma, and I'm very pleased to introduce Eric Grants, Board President, and Tennealle Aguilar, the Chief Executive Officer of Coloma Home for the Aged. Eric, can I start with you? Would you mind please sketching out for us a quick overview of Coloma? Where is it? What services do you provide? How large is it? Just give us an impression of the service for which you are president.
Thank you, Janet. Coloma was built in 1997. It's a residential aged care facility in Goondiwindi. Goondiwindi is a population of 6,000 people. We're about 4 and a bit hours west of Brisbane. We sit on the McIntyre River, entirely in Queensland. The other side of the river is the dark side, New South Wales. We look after low, high care, dementia and home care. Meals on Wheels also works out of our kitchen. We're probably the best situated aged care facility in Australia in that each room has its own back door. The north side look out on the golf course, so they have open green pastures and trees to look at all the time. The southern side look out on gardens. So every room is sole occupancy. Every room has their back door, and there's a view that everyone can look after. So I think we've had a couple of extensions over the years. So we started off at 36. We're now running a 69-bed facility.
Wow, it sounds idyllic. I think there may be a queue forming as we talk, but thank you, Eric. That's a really nice overview of the services. And you pointed out that you're not just about residential care, you are actually a much broader suite of services for the local community, and also providing facilities for services with which you have a loose affiliation, such as Meals on Wheels and so on. So that's, you sound like you're very much a part of the local community. Would that be fair?
We're very grateful that the Clome is very much part of the community. Goondiwindi is actually a very rich agricultural area, so there's a lot of money here, and the community look after us, and we talk to them. So yes, we are very much part of the community every day.
Okay, all right, let's get to the essence of what we're talking about today then. As board president, you obviously have some fairly significant responsibilities in providing leadership and fostering a positive organisation culture, and I'm quite sure you and your board colleagues take that very seriously. What I'm particularly interested to hear from you about is, in your role, how do you see the role and the purpose of a consumer advisory body in relation to the aged care experience? What is the nature of your expectation of how your service interacts with older people receiving care in the presence of a consumer advisory body, almost effectively to co-design care? How does that work for you, and is that the way you see it?
Yes, and as we spoke earlier, it was very easy for us to move to the consumer advocacy body, because probably like everyone else, we do have monthly residential meetings every month. Before the meeting, Tennealle gives us, everyone, a one-page agenda, so everyone knows what's going to be discussed. All residents who are available come to the meeting, plus any relations or friends, etc. Tennealle chairs the meeting. I'm always there as well. So as a lead into the CAB, every month, every resident has a chance to go through all the issues, including cleaning services, laundry services, maintenance, food, etc. So we talk to residents about that, listen to what they've got to say. And as you mentioned, when that CAB was first thought of, we instantly brought that to the attention of our residents. So from day one, we've been talking to them about the benefits of the CAB and getting them involved and explaining to them that we feel it's a joint thing between the board, Tennealle and the executive and the residents, that we all share the one goal of making things better for everybody. And I think the reason we've been successful here is the residents understand that we value their opinion. We actually listen to what they've got to say, and then we positively respond, because there's no point having a board if it's just a flicking and ticking situation, and the residents will not respond unless they feel that they're getting some value out of it. But in this case, we talk to them. Tennealle talks to them as the president. I'm amongst them and have a cup of tea and chat as well. So we're visible. They see us, they understand us, and we talk to them.
I get it. Okay. So, Eric, can you summon to mind an example of an issue that they or you have raised where their input has actually informed the board's thinking and caused you to reflect or make a decision you might not otherwise have done in a particular way, where they've been influential?
Yes, and again, there's a 4-page diary note from the minutes of their meeting. So again, they've had a meeting, they provided an exact diary note, which went to Neil. She and I sat and talked about it, came up with recommendations. Then it all came to the board, and then we provided a nice written response to them about that. I mean, a lot of it's just basic stuff, but if people are interested or they've got a concern, then we deal with it. And one very easy one is there was an issue about people wanting late night snacks. Like you have dinner, people want late night snacks, and one of them was talking about toast. And we had explained, well, we can't do toast at night time because of its smoke detectors and things like that. But if you wanted late night snacks, we've got various things that we can give to them. We've got stuff that they can cook up with noodles and spaghetti and things like that, or cup of soup. Or if you wanted toast, talk to the staff and they'll go out to the lunchroom and do it for you. I mean, it's very simple, basic stuff, but it's obviously an issue they had, and we've spoken to them. And again, it has to be formalised in the CAB and they issue our response. So it's all in writing, so it's documented. But we go one step further. At the next residents meeting, we then spoke about it in general. So it's not just the board going to the CAB committee and whether they communicate to all the residents. We did that anyway and said, here are the issues which the CAB have brought up, and here are our responses. The other one, very quickly, was after hours access. This is probably relevant to every person listening here. We do 8 to 8, and probably most other people do. But in a lot of areas that people work different hours, and there were some residents concerned about what do we do about that. And it can be a particular issue for some people. So we've addressed it, talked to them, said, well, you have to understand the safety of staff and all residents. We can't just randomly let anybody in after hours. So we've agreed, and Tennealle spoke to our solicitor, and there's an arrangement where they will sign a document saying that we will give them the passcode to the door to get in, so long as they don't share that with anyone else. So that's kept confidentially with them. And within 48, 24 hour, 12 hour before they come in, they'll email us, so the staff at the time know about when someone's coming in and how many. So it's just it's a touchy issue about access. That people want to access their family and friends, but they've got to understand it's got to be in a structured way. And at the end of the day, I think everyone was happy with that. So those two issues, again, not necessarily serious issues, but people were asking questions. We've addressed it, and everyone's gone, okay, well, we're happy with that.
And what you've also pointed out, Eric, is the closing the loop. So that they've raised something, the board's taken it on, you've discussed it with the management, you've come up with a solution, you've taken it back. This is what we can do. We know what you want. This is what we can do. And there's a meeting of the minds. And as you say, they feel heard because they have been heard. They have been influential in shaping a process or a policy setting in the service, which is going to benefit them and indeed is to the general benefit of the service. So you've actually closed the loop, which is the whole point, isn't it?
And explaining the reasons, like, here's your question, here's their answer, and this is why their answer is. And for further question, we discuss it, but at the end of the day, everyone goes, okay, we're happy with that result. That's what we're looking for.
All right. Let me bring in Tennealle here. Tennealle, Chief Executive Officer. You provide both home services and residential care. And I've got a question for you from Diana. In-home support. Have you extended your CAB to include those clients as well? Diana wants to know. You have a short answer for that?
So one of our members, his wife actually receives home care as well through us. So he is a member of our CAB. I think he's the vice chair of our CAB. But his wife receives services under our home care program also. So he's basically a direct voice from that side of things as well.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. So what was the extent of the change that you had to introduce in order to meet the new CAB requirements? You had something in place by way of a possibly a less formal arrangement, but you've obviously made certain differences to ensure that you're meeting your obligations and getting the full benefit from the new requirements. So can you sketch out what changes you had to make?
To be honest, not much. We just
Not
made
much?
it official. Coloma's
Okay.
been doing this setup for years, a number of years. We've always been open and honest about our situation regarding care, regarding finance, anything in particular to do with residents, and they've always been a part of co-designing care here. We've always spoke honestly and openly in residents' meetings. We are quite visible, as Eric said. So, you know, I'll get to work early and I'll often come out and chat to a few of the ladies out the front of my office that do folding, and they'll feed back some information they've heard from others. And you know, I'll go for a wander up the corridors and someone else, I'll ask how their day is going and they'll feed something back that I wouldn't have normally heard. So we've always done it like that for a number of years, and just having the legislation change, it was just essentially making it official. When it comes to the board, they've always been visible. I mean, the previous, some of the board members that aren't on the board anymore, they've always volunteered and done people's nails and things like that. So they've always had that visibility. And Eric always comes to our residents' meetings, even takes the minutes. And if it's not him, another board member comes. So we've always been visible and they've always been aware of what's going on day to day. It's just making it more official.
Yeah.
You know, the
That's
offer to
interesting.
establish.
Yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of questions coming. Cheryl and Gwenda have asked a similar sort of question, and I want to take you to this next. So how do you ensure that everyone who wants to be involved is involved? Because there would be different levels of capability. You know, how confident are you that you're hearing everyone's voice and it's not just a small section of the community who's more vocal?
Yes, that's a good point. Exactly. So we go around and see them. We go and see the people that don't come to the meetings. We go and see the people that we don't see, that we wouldn't otherwise see. They don't participate in activities as much. So we pop our head in and see them. And it's just making sure that you get around to everyone. Well, you have a chat to families in the hallways and you just do a bit of small talk and suddenly that opens everything else up, you know, what else might be going on. So it's just remaining contactable by everyone, not just a small group. But the other thing is too, I mean, when we done the office to establish, like I said, with the different capabilities and stuff like that, I did have a lady come to me that said she would be very much love to participate, but she thought she was too old. And I said, that's not okay.
It's not a criterion we recognise.
Yeah. She said, I wouldn't have any good ideas. And I said, well, you don't have to have ideas. You could just go to the meetings and maybe just give your input if they have the ideas. And I said, and the alternative to her, I said, why don't I give your granddaughter a ring and see if she's happy to go with you and support you? And she was very happy about that. And that's what she wanted to do. So that was a thing, you know, when you're looking at different capabilities, helping to support them to do to participate if they like.
Yeah. And in terms of your home care clients, they wouldn't be available as readily geographically because you're not walking down a corridor, but presumably there are points of connection with them as well, where you're checking in, seeing how things are going, looking to see whether there are any concerns that they might want to raise. Does it happen informally the same way?
Yeah, so our actual home care coordinator, she does a lot of the hands-on as well with all of the clients. So she always, she's not sitting in an office just managing packages and stuff. She's out there doing the personal care. She's on the ground. She sees every single client herself. So she does it the same way I do, basically. Checks in with them that way. If they have any concerns to raise, they're pretty quick off the mark to raise if they have any concerns, and it's resolved pretty much straight away. So that's our advantage on that side of things too.
And can I ask a follow-up question? Are all of your staff comfortable with this approach? I mean, I'm assuming they work for you and are part of this workplace culture, and if there were a clash, they might make other career choices. So it's probably a bit of an obvious answer for you to offer, but you are describing a culture of an organisation as much as you are a process, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. And we do the same system for staff. We'll be honest why we can't do something. If we can't do something the staff ask, we'll go to the exact reason why. We'll be honest about staffing, care things, finance. It's just being open and transparent with everyone. And the vast majority of people understand. And if someone doesn't understand, then the rest that do understand, basically get them to understand. that's how it works.
Yeah.
It's sort of you work as
Yeah.
a community.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, let's go to some of the tangible lessons learned and benefits. And Eric, you've already shared with us some specific examples of where a difference has been made. And you've also described the formality of that process, which is an obligation under the revised Act too. So, you know, you're complying with the new expectations that attach to you through the law. But do you feel that that the formality of it somehow strengthens the accountability of the board to the people to whom you're providing care and to staff? You know, has this given you a more structured way of understanding the feelings and preferences of older people?
Well, I think it's important that if you're going to have an inclusive board, they all need to be across these things. Again, Tennille's obviously there every day and hears all this on their reserving and other matters, but not all the board can be there a lot of the time. So it's important that as part of the structure of having minutes from their meeting and coming to the board, that all the board gets to understand all of the requirements from the residents and gets to discuss what the answers are. So again, we don't necessarily want it to be just Tennille and I dealing with the CAB and coming up with answers. We need it to make sure it's Tennille and her staff and the board being involved. So there does need to be some formality, as in writing backwards and forwards, so everyone understands what are the questions and there's no misinterpretation and what are the answers. So it's important everyone's involved and everyone gets a full understanding of what actually occurs.
Okay. You and I were talking offline, and I want to raise the question with you again because I thought you had a really keen understanding of this. Some providers are anxious about this new obligation because they think somehow it's putting more control in the consumer's hands, and that's not going to go well because there are certain things that a provider simply can't accommodate for a cost reason or a safety reason, a staffing reason, or possibly a physical infrastructure reason. You know, there are any number of shaping variables which govern the way in which services are delivered and the experience of that care. But you have quite a different view of this. It's not actually about giving over control, it's about collaborating in success. Do you just want to expand on that?
Well, again, it's their home. This is where they live. We need to understand what do they want and what do they need. And to sum up exactly what you've said, Coloma now has completely Wi-Fi, so all the nurses that don't need to be writing paper charts anymore, they've got Wi-Fi. Well, there has been a request from residents about Wi-Fi. So Tennille has said to them, we will look into it, but we need to understand it'll have to be a separate system, because if we have residents coming onto that system, it'll slow it down, and this needs to be for the staff. So we're going to have a separate system. We need to look at what costs are and things like that. So it's a matter of encouraging questions, but understanding it's not necessarily always going to be, yes, we'll do that. It'll be, yes, we understand your question and why. We've thought about it, and here's our response, and this is why we're saying yes or no or maybe. So again, I think it's just accepting that, again, this is where they live. If they've got an issue or question, then they've got the right to be asking these things, and you need to be encouraging this. This is why our CAB has been so successful, because if the residents understand that Tennille and her staff and I on the board embrace the CAB, encourage it, and basically say, if you've got a question or a request, ask it, and we will think about it, and we will come back with a response, and then we will give you reasons why yes we did or no we don't. That's all they can ask for, and every time so far people have been happy with, I understand the answer to your question. And again, it's all about encouraging people to be involved, and they're happy to do that. It's not giving over control. It's again, it's where they live. Surely they've got the right to make requests.
Yeah. Oh, you put that so straightforwardly. All right, Tennille, slightly more tricky question. There must have been some challenges. Were there episodes or instances where you kind of thought, crumbs, this is going to be a bit difficult for us to navigate? And I can see Eric shaking his head. But Tennille, you know, any slightly choppy waters, or has it been relatively straightforward?
No, not really, to be honest. I think managing the fears of people when they first heard about it,
Yeah.
Thinking, oh no, like you said, touched on it before, consumers having control and you have to do as they say. That's not the case. You do what you can do within reason, you explain why. But the other thing is too, they really need to, or provide, and I shouldn't say all providers, but people need to get over the fear of thinking that they're going to be controlled and they're going to be able to make business decisions on behalf of the business. That's not how it works. In actual fact, it's a bit of relief for us because it's not just me sitting at the top. I've got a volunteer board of directors. They're volunteers.
Yeah.
I'm the one paid in the top position. Now, if I do something wrong, it all falls on me. But if I've got a whole community backing me with our residents of Coloma, and they said, well, we actually got the minutes here. We discussed it. We helped decide this. That's a bit of relief for me. That's pressure off me. And people aren't going to argue with the consumers when they're the ones that have decided it, basically. So people need to look at it that way. And then even if, you know, it was a decision we couldn't go with, they will say, well, you know, you can't really, you know, say anything negative about Coloma because we discussed it and we know why they can't do this. And, you know, that's just how it is. So they will actually defend us. So that's just something people need to take into consideration. Our residents that we have here defend us quite significantly with decisions and they back us up quite a lot.
Yeah, because they're a participant in the decision making, which is the you know the real strength. Another question, and I'm going to press you a bit on this because I know it's the experience of some other providers. There won't always be a unanimous position among your older folk. Some will think strongly one way, others might have an equally strong view in the other direction. So you're not going to get consensus every time you take an issue to them, or in fact, every time they raise an issue with you. How do you navigate those difficulties? Because some views are very strongly held and there might be some who take a bit of convincing. How do you manage that?
Well, we obviously speak as a group. I can't really give there probably is an example I can't think on my toes, but these are the ones you follow up with individually, especially if someone has a view that's the complete opposite. Go and chat to them privately. Listen to what they have to say, repeat back to them what they've just told you. You know, you do your active listening, and if you can still be in disagreements, it's fine, but at least they feel they've been heard.
That's true.
And you just got to make sure they feel heard. And if someone feels heard, then they're not going to have any, anything negative to think about it as such, because they feel they've been heard. Whether or not we go with the decision's a different story, but it's just making sure that everyone feels heard, basically.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so important. So let's talk about people with some degree of cognitive impairment who may be unable to express their own views and speak for themselves, who are reliant on people representing their interests and concerns. I think I heard you and or Eric say that you welcome family members to participate in these exercises. How does that work? Is it sort of, you know, everyone in the room has a voice?
Yeah, so in that case, I mean, in particular with our residents meetings, which are separate from the CAB meetings because they have their own separate one, but obviously we communicate between the two. Family members are invited and some of them often come and will raise their hand and ask questions. But not only that, we do have people that are support workers under the NDIS that see clients here. They speak as advocates for their clients they see in Coloma. We have a number of different representatives, not just families, but different organisations that can come to those meetings and will actually ask questions as well. Okay,
so you've reminded us of the distinction between your residents meetings and your CAB. Just say again how people become a member of CAB, because that's a more distinct group, isn't it? Do they put their hands up, or how does that work?
So we've done our original offer to establish, but the other thing we do is every residents meeting we go over what a CAB is. And members of the CAB are there and they quite often say, you know, they'll discuss things, but we always say you can join the CAB at any time. You just need to come and let us know, or you can come and see one of the members. It's always open for new people to join. And we actually describe every time, not just once a year or once every 3 months, every residents meeting, we describe what the CAB's for and what it's there for and who can join and things like that, basically.
And as you've already described, you also support people who might be a little bit anxious about participating or adding value. And basically you're encouraging them, saying, no, you know, it's if you've got something to say, this is an opportunity for you to say it and you shouldn't be shy. which is really wonderful, particularly for older people who may not have had many of those experiences in their recent lives. So you're reawakening them as agents in their own lives who have the capacity to make a difference to the care that they receive. Okay, thank you. I'm going to close that part of the session, but I want to take us briefly to Louise. Louise, I have a couple of questions for you, and then we'll go to Q&A. And we have received some questions, but please, for those who are watching, feel free to submit your questions. We will have a bit of time, and I am very keen to ensure that we address the issues that are on your minds as you listen to this webinar. So, Louise, to you. Can you briefly outline for everyone watching the role of the Commission in relation to governance and the way we would seek to understand what providers are doing to ensure that they have appropriate organisational governance, and particularly in relation to the CAB?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Look, the Commission ensures that providers are delivering safe, high-quality care that meets the needs and preferences of the older people in their care. And providers must show that they're meeting the aged care quality standards and the Charter of Aged Care rights. So in practice, this means that providers and their governing bodies, as we've heard from Tennille and Eric, are using their feedback and their complaint systems to hear directly from the older people in their care about those care experiences that they're having. And then the governing body and the executive of a provider are using this information to improve the care experience by having the older people play a central role in those discussions and those decisions about their care needs. So our focus to date has been on raising awareness and educating providers about their obligations. We've been promoting our Governing for Reform program, which supports governing body members, leaders and executives to strengthen their corporate and clinical governance capabilities. And that program is available via our website. We've also published on our website a regulatory bulletin on strengthening provider governance. And we've held workshops and webinars just like today on good governance and culture and taking a person-centred approach to quality care. We've also been reviewing the information we receive from complaints and serious incidents and other mandatory reporting, including the resident experience surveys and the annual provider operations report, to see what that's telling us about how the governance requirements are working for providers. Because this intelligence is informing our upcoming quality reviews and our financial and quality audits of providers. And in preparation for these audits, we're also interviewing staff and those receiving care about their experiences. And we then will use all of this information when working with the provider to address any areas of concerns that are arising.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any early insights into experiences with consumer advisory bodies? I think probably the best way of configuring that is it varies. You know, we have services like Coloma who seem to be nailing it, but others perhaps who are earlier on in their journey and are not quite as certain about how they deliver on this obligation. Would that be a fair characterisation?
Yeah, that's right, Janet. Look, that's definitely the case. The feedback that we've been receiving varies from how do you go about setting up a consumer advisory body? How do you operate one? How do you get people involved? Do they need to be a different advisory body depending on whether it's home care or residential care? Where should we hold the consumer advisory body? Can it be virtual, or does it need to be actually in person? Where's the location of it? Does it need to be in our facility, or can it be somewhere else? And I think the message I would give you all is you need to start somewhere. You've heard Tennille and Eric talk about you know, the fact that they looked at what the requirements were and started talking about it with the people in their care. and they continue talking about it, and hear from them. And it's all about good communication. Hear from them how they wanted to go about it, be involved. Really, when you look at the requirements under the Aged Care Act, you know, there is a lot of opportunity to innovate and be creative and listen to the older people in your care and their family and supporters about how you go about getting one up and running and getting involved in that. The requirement is simply that you are offering to set up a consumer advisory body at least once every 12 months. And making changes to it by hearing directly from the people involved how it's working for them. And we've got that discussion guide on our website that can help you begin a conversation with the older people in your care who are involved in the consumer advisory body.
Okay, that's a really useful way to close your comment, because we're getting a number of questions through about tips and tricks. You know, where do we start? What does an agenda look like? Are there templates and so on? And I think you would guide people towards our resources online, which are on our website, as a useful place to start. And the other thing is, where you start is may not be where you end up. You start somewhere, as Louise said, and be confident in your journey, and know that you might not get it all right, but that you can course correct. You are working collaboratively with the people to whom you're delivering care, and you're on a journey together. And if they see that you're genuine, and as Tennealle and Eric have said, if they see that you're listening, they will give you a lot of ground in order to find the right path together. That's the point, I think. And so I commend all of you for the questions you've asked about the how. Have a look at our resources and see whether that gives you some guidance as to where to start and how to proceed. All right. Let's go to questions and answers, and there are a number which have come in. Perhaps I'll start, Tennealle, with you. There's a question that's come in. I'm interested in ways to implement client voice in everyday business decisions, as well as reporting requirements for the CAB activities. Any suggestions? It sounds to me as if you're not creating a sharp distinction between matters that might be relevant to CAB versus more everyday concerns. And this also goes to another question I saw from someone, I won't find it quickly enough, who was offering a view that you seem to be dealing with operational matters, which would normally be dealt with by management rather than go to the board. And Eric, you may have a view of that, but it seems to me that the visibility is part of the accountability and the transparency of that. But Tennealle, perhaps starting with you, would it be fair to think that there's nothing which is off the table in the conversations you have at CAB, or are there some things that you would direct into a different pathway?
Look, no, not really. I mean, our board in general deal with our overall governance, but of course, if the CAB has an operational type question they want to ask the board, they can go right ahead. I've got nothing to hide. Nothing really is off the table unless you're talking about an individual's privacy and things like that. But when it comes to business decisions, not just around care, we're talking about financial viability, we're talking about commercial activities, all that kind of stuff. Our residents, our staff have input for that. Our residents do our flower arrangements for our restaurant we have locally every Thursday night. So, and they make suggestions for that on about what we should put on the menu. So they have an input in everything here, not just care. We talk about finance. There's one lady on the CAB that reads all the Stewart and Brown reports and the aged care sector reports and the commission reports. I print them off and give them to her. So she loves to read that stuff. So they're well informed when it comes to all that, which makes it easier for us because we don't have to do as much explaining for things. So not really, I mean, there's not really anything off the table as such.
Okay, all right, that's a useful way of framing it. Eric, next question for you. There's a question that somebody said, how do other organisations pique client interest for the CAB? Because applications have been minimal for us. So you're not in that position. Obviously, you have lots of older people who are very keen to participate either in the residence and or the CAB for you. But if you're in a circumstance where people were leaning back rather than forwards into this opportunity, what would you recommend? What action should they take?
Well, obviously, the first thing is you need to be encouraging them rather than going, oh, this is something we just have to do and it's just a burden. And people might be old, but they're not silly. But they can look at you and look at, say, Tennealle, and if they can see where you are genuinely being enthusiastic and you're saying, this is a really good idea, we really want you to do that, and this is for your benefit. If you have issues or something you want to talk about, this is your opportunity to do that. So I think if people are reticent, that is either because, one, they're not seeing a genuine encouragement to go and do it, and they're not seeing any value. But if you say, we really want you to do it, and the value is you can help yourself. So I think it's to be expected to some extent, but it should be easily overcome.
Yeah, okay, all right, fair enough. Louise, next question for you. There may be some uncertainty or even concern among providers about what the consequences would be if they were found to be non-compliant. Now, I think overall our message is a reassuring one, that in the first instance, we'd be looking at the efforts that have been made and how successful they've been, but also what further ideas the provider is pursuing in order that they can comply. Would that be a fair characterisation of our approach to regulating this area?
Yeah, Janet, that's right. Look, at all times, we do expect providers and their governing bodies to cooperate and show a willingness to comply with the governance responsibilities and to be reaching for really high quality care and looking for those opportunities to improve. And so what we expect is that providers and their governing bodies are engaging with the older people in their care to understand their experiences and what you know, how they would like to be part of remedying any concerns that they're experiencing, basically. Now, what we would also expect to see is that providers are developing solutions in partnership, and that they're practicing open disclosure and things like that. And it really does come down to good communication between the governing body and the management of a provider and the older people in their care. And at the end of the day, good outcomes for everybody involved require leadership within the provider, to build that right culture and skills, and build that engagement, whether it's through consumer advisory bodies or by other means. And our focus would be on the efforts that providers are putting into how they're going to support and enable consumer advisory bodies. And we would be, we will incentivise providers to achieve this through our sector education and also through how we supervise providers and manage non-compliance. But in the first instance, we really want to see a really good effort on the part of a provider to actually embrace the requirements and get started. There is really no reason not to start. Give it a go.
Yeah, hear. Okay, now there are some questions we've received which suggest that the provider has been seeking to constrain the membership of a CAB, so to ensure that it is not actually come one, come all, or there's not an open invitation. It's a far more limited opportunity than that, and the question gives the implication that this is a constraint which is not welcome. Perhaps Louise, contemplate that from a regulatory perspective while I put the question to Eric. Eric, this is not your experience at all. You and Tennealle have quite a different experience from this, but to the extent that you might understand that instinct, what would your peer-to-peer advice be to that provider? I mean, you'd already obviously offer it respectfully because they'll make their own way, but as the board president, you've worked your way through this in a really constructive way. Maybe some of your peer providers are struggling a bit more. What recommendations or advice would you have for them?
Well, I would ask them to be honest with themselves and go, what is the fear? What is it that they're scared of? Why are you restricting the board to certain people? There's obviously, for me, it sounds like there's an underlying fear of something. What are you scared of?
Yeah, well, it's a good way of framing it. Sometimes it might be logistics, and while you have a substantial organisation with numbers of older people receiving care, there are numbers of providers who are larger than you, and I wonder whether there are volume considerations. For example, Tennielle's direct contact with residents in the home is far more difficult if there are multiple services. So I don't know whether you or Tennielle would have insights into how you would manage this if you were larger. It's a hypothetical question and probably not a fair one, but to the extent that you might play with that idea, any views that you would share with your colleagues?
Well, my thought would be, do you have to simply have one cab? Like if you've got a first floor and a second floor, east wings or west wings, and where the residents are segregated by geography, why not have a cab for each section? If it's obviously too difficult to try and get everybody together, we'll go, well, let's have an upstairs and a downstairs cab, or a left wing or right wing cab. So why not have more than one to fit in with the group of people that you're dealing with?
Yeah. There's another question which has come through. Is it compulsory to include resident representatives and resident family members in a cab? Louise, let me come to you for the rules. My sense is that doesn't pertain to an obligation, but the mere framing of the question in that way speaks to whether someone values the experience that is offered by a consumer advisory body. Do you have a view on that?
Yes, look, it's not enshrined in the legislation, but that said, we've set out in our regulatory bulletin that we do expect providers, if you're going to achieve the spirit and intention of a consumer advisory body, you really do need to have older people and their families and friends and their supporters, and perhaps I say be bold and enjoy the contributions of your wider community if you want to succeed as a provider and enjoy a great reputation in your community, and be somewhere that people would like to plan for in their own older age, as somewhere where they might like to live. So I would really encourage you to have a look at our regulatory bulletin, and don't be constrained. Invite people, encourage them to be involved. Find out why it might be difficult or there's concerns about being involved, and as Eric said, get creative about how you go about setting up a cab. At the end of the day, for us, you mentioned there, Janet, wanting to hear from me before about how we might respond from a regulatory approach. Look, our response to any non-compliance would be informed by a range of factors, including if the provider demonstrates that they are actively working to comply with the obligations. And where a provider does demonstrate it's actively working to comply, our response would be very different from where the provider is unable to demonstrate a suitable response or deliberately avoids compliance with the obligations. So yeah, really the control is, sitting with the provider on this one, and we would be looking to see how they respond. Is it voluntarily and fully embracing the opportunity, or is it, are they trying to deliberately avoid their obligations?
Yeah, there are a run of questions in relation to Commonwealth Home Support Program service clients and home care package recipients. And the questions give the impression that logistically, at least, because the numbers could be larger, there may be greater challenges in hearing the voices of those people. And Tennielle, I asked you earlier the way in which you managed your home care clients and so on, but I just wonder if the volume was much larger, and I'm just thinking also about Louise's comments about be innovative, find a new path if a conventional path isn't going to give you the benefit and the results that you're looking for. And I think the same sort of considerations might apply to people whose first language is not English. If you're seeking to hear their voice, you might need to find alternative pathways to ensure that they are not muted by virtue of not being able to converse in the language of the meeting. And I don't know whether Goondiwindi has those sorts of issues in play. Eric, you first.
Again, I think it's just a matter, as you said, of finding a pathway for everyone to be involved. And if you have issues, even on a day-to-day basis in places like Colombo, if you have one or more people who have a different language, well, then as a matter of fact, even before the CAB, you would be wanting to find ways that they could adequately talk to other people and staffing. So it wouldn't be just for the sake of the CAB, it'd be for the day-to-day use. But again, if they wanted to be part of the CAB, then you would be wanting to make sure that they had someone that could interpret for them. So yes, you don't want them to be excluded, because again, they may have an idea that others may not. I mean, again, we all have different ways of thinking, and you might have a CAB of 4 or 5 people that all think the same way. You bring in one fresh new member, and suddenly there's all sorts of new ideas happening. So I think for different nationalities, for different languages, it's important that every day they are involved. As for home care, well, that's a tougher question, so I'll let Tennealle answer that one.
Tennealle, do you have any ideas on that one? If the numbers were much larger?
Yeah, home care, I mean, we have about 25 packages under us, so it's quite manageable. But if you're looking for a larger organisation, I mean, at the moment, some of our home care clients do respite at Coloma, so they join in with our residential consumers. They come to our themed days. So if you're looking for a larger group of home care clients, why not invite them into the facility for a day or for a lunch or something like that to get in touch and talk about the CAB? Maybe something like that would work.
And you know what you and Eric are describing, and it strikes me very clearly. Basically, what you're outlining is person-centered care. That's the reductionist argument right there, because in all the answers you've provided, you have taken us to the person and what matters to them, and making sure that you hear with clarity what matters to them, allowing them to voice their own views and opinions and preferences, and then paying them the respect and the courtesy of listening to those and responding to those, taking them seriously, and ensuring that you use them as part of what shapes the judgments that you make, Tennealle, at your level, at senior management, and then the decisions that ultimately might flow through to the board, which have to do with use of funds, priorities, strategy, to ensure that you are financially viable and also hitting your marks and exceeding your goals in relation to providing safe quality care. So I think that's pretty much what you've landed. Now, let me just check if there are any other. One final question. How big is your CAB, Tennealle? How many people do you have on it? I know that it would move each time you make the offer and somebody decides to join or not, but just give us a rough approximation.
Yeah, so it has 4 people on it. So we're a 69-bed facility, and obviously depending on the size of the facility and the case mix of consumers would depend on who wants to be on it. But the other thing I wanted to mention was we didn't just leave it as an invitation to join the CAB. I went around a week or 2 later and I went to every single resident in the building and I said, "Did you get my letter?" "Yes, I did." "What do you think?" "Oh, it's all right. I might join it." I said, "Well, that's good. Why don't I come back in a week and we'll talk about it then? Have a think about it." And, you know, one of them, I twisted their arm slightly, not literally though. But they love it. And so they're probably the leading driver to get everyone else on there. So, you know, they themselves go around and actively recruit as well. So, and that consists of 1 representative and the 3 other are residents.
Okay.
Well, actually, one's a resident and a representative, sort of, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that works in your favour is that you've got the residents committee alongside it. And it might be that the value proposition for being in the CAB is slightly diluted because they know that their voice will also be listened to in your residents meeting. So through one or other of those channels, they are involved in shaping the care and their care experience in really material ways. And I think it reflects great credit on your organisation and on your board. So well done to both of you. And if I can close out the session with a few thank yous, Tennealle and Eric, you've been brilliant. Thank you so much for participating in this and sharing your wisdom and hard-earned experiences. And I know that from the comments that there are a lot of people who've gained a great deal. So well done to both of you. And thank you also, of course, to Louise for being the regulator on the panel and offering that really important perspective as well. A reminder, please, to stay online to complete the survey, which will pop up at the very end. We do want to hear from you. And finally, there will be a recording of this session. It will be available to you on our website, and we will send an email link to it if you want to watch it again or recommend it to any of your colleagues. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my panel members, and have a great rest of the week. Take care.